been at IndieWire for 9 years, and I would say that by far the subject that has been most challenging to both discuss and write about has been AI in the last year. And I think there's kind of two main reasons for this. One, there's a lot of negativity towards AI, and that very much comes from the IndieWire community, our readers, but also the filmmakers that we love and cover. There is a lot of apprehension about this, and it comes from a place that I completely relate to, right? We're worried about jobs, but we're also worried about protecting the artists and the art form that we love. And so from that feeling is often a knee-jerk, all AI is bad. But then we have on the other extreme, there's a lot of money in AI, and there's a lot of hype. And you guys read the same headlines I do with these outsized promises of what they're gonna do. It doesn't translate to what we're actually seeing in terms of results. And so what we're really hoping to do with this panel is live in between those two worlds, between the dismay and the hype. And we're gonna look at about 4 or 5, maybe if we cruise, maybe 6 different areas in which AI is actually being used today by filmmakers. And we've got these great panelists, and based on what they're seeing possible right now, where are we gonna be in about a year or two? We're not gonna get too speculative, but what's possible right now? And we got a great group coming at this from a bunch of different angles I wanna introduce to you. My first panelist, Diana Williams, CEO and co-founder of Kinetic Energy Entertainment. And we have Brian Solomon, the creative technology director at Framestore. And if you do not know Framestore, you aren't reading Bill Diswitz's VFX coverage at IndieWire.com. You got to fix that. Framestore, one of our leading VFX companies. Just this month, we got Wicked and Gladiator coming out. Those are Framestore projects. So very excited to have Brian here. And we also have Dave Clark, filmmaker, director, AI guru. If you go to Dave's website, you're going to see trailers, concept videos, commercials, things that he's made with AI. This is a filmmaker who very much is viewing AI as a tool for him to be able to make films that he hasn't been able to up to now. So very happy to have Dave here. And then last but not least, Erik Weaver, who is the director of adaptive productions at ETC. For people that don't know, ETC is the Entertainment Technology Center at USC. This is our leading think tank and research center in this industry, started by George Lucas in 1993. And it was by design, lives really in this nexus of industry leaders, tech companies, and innovators. So really excited to have Erik with us today. Diana, the music didn't allow me to give the full breadth of your bio, and I apologize for that, but I think you're a legend, people know. And Diana, I want to start with you. Topic number 1, AI as a concept tool. I'm wondering if you'd talk a little bit about some of the storytellers that you've been working with through Kinetic and what you're seeing in terms of how creators are using AI as a concept tool.
First of all, thanks everybody for being here. So when we're looking and thinking about AI, and there's so many different subjects underneath that, but what AI is enabling right now for people to do is if it's in your head, you have the ability to then get it out of your head. And so when we're looking at it and using it, we're thinking about, first of all, with my company, we're looking at transforming ideas into IP into franchise, if things are going your way. So how are we first getting that idea out there? And so it's looking at using all the various tools, and there's like 4,336 tools out there right now that we come up with, like what the story world or what the idea of the story world is, or the characters, and what we're looking at is like what is what we call creative consensus within our company. We work with and partner with the creator. We get the idea out of that person's head, and we just all say, is this where we want to start? Do we all agree with like the feel of this world, the look of this world, what these characters are doing? Do we all just have a consensus? And then from there, we then start the build with different talents and different people to build it out. And this has been going on for a long time. I think that prior to this, this 24 months of AI, when a filmmaker would go into a studio with like, I got this script in a dream, and they're like, well, we don't get what it is, or we don't believe those people exist. then you would go back and you would try to figure out how to do it. You could do it through doing storyboards, or you could do what was called a rip-o-matic. A rip-o-matic, you are taking images from other films to put together to show someone, here's how the flow of the story can go, here's the pacing of it. And so this is just another way of doing a rip-o-matic, which I feel like Dave did with Battalion.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of people forget it's more than just, we're not going to get into any of that, but when you're trying to sell your vision as a filmmaker, we all know it's very hard. Directors have been using YouTube trailers and things to create rip-o-matics to try to sell their idea. And what I've been doing is actually been using generative AI to create these concept pitches for films that, otherwise probably wouldn't even get me a meeting. But an example is Battalion that I did, which was a World War II film about the only African-American battalion to go on the Omaha beaches during World War II. So we've never seen that before. So I used generative AI to envision that. It went crazy viral, and that got me a bunch of meetings. But it's just to show that it's not this idea of replacing. It's this idea of augmenting us as filmmakers, and it's really giving us a superpower to really show our vision.
So from Framestore's perspective, we pre-visualize every single shot and every single film. My team specifically works out of New York. We do a lot of advertising. There's rarely a deck that doesn't come through the door that has at least one generated AI image. And it's because they're trying to convey as quick as they can, is my idea possible? And the time in which you can give them an answer is the make or break of that production even happening sometimes. So we love it because it's show don't tell, as all of you know, and anything that you can do to kind of demystify language, we don't always say the right words in a pitch, or we might not write it in a certain way, but if you show it and you feel it, it's kind of undisputable at that point.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm working on some projects where the writer-director can literally get 3-4 months worth of work done in a couple hours or a day or two, and really clearly convey that vision of what film we're all making, and so I totally agree with all the things along there. And some of the tools as they're advancing right now is incredible, what you can do. You can create amazing new characters, and then all of a sudden you can put them in those storyboards, taking just little basic drawings and building out your whole world.
And part of it, Brian, right, is also the collaboration process. I imagine how many weeks and months get lost because you try to interpret what a director wants, and maybe saving some of that time.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely get a lot of time back. I will say it can go the other way, also just as quick, where sometimes you get, someone who might have a lot of great visual ideas, but does that necessarily always translate to exactly, what it is? It's different when you work with brands versus film. My team tends to work with brands and creative directors a lot more than we work with a film director for the most part. But on that side of the company as well, Framestore has just a ton of resources dedicated to on-set pre-visualization, real-time techniques to do the same thing. And we just find that the combination between real-time, what you might have seen, Dune used a very similar approach, exact angles of sun, exact timings of day. These are things that you can't do without real time. And AI is just sort of the extension to that. It's kind of like the texture layer and lets you kind of go back over the top of that and use it differently. So.
Dave's previs is something that's been used on large scale projects for a while. We've all seen the previs of some of our favorite big movies. How close are we to previs being a tool that an independent filmmaker could use in terms of the software with AI? Has that come far way?
I mean, I think we're there today. I can tell you and it's not just independent filmmakers. I'm talking about some of the top 10 Hollywood legend filmmakers you can imagine. They're using it, and they're reaching. And the reason why I know is because they reach out to me. It's a thing that it's going to be adopted soon heavily. Right now, we're still on the cutting edge of a lot of the tools. A lot of these guys can attest to, but I think the sooner that a filmmaker, and I'm sure there's a lot of filmmakers in this room, as soon as you can realize that these tools are nothing without your story, without your creativity, without human ingenuity, I think the quicker we can then empower ourselves to use them and not make them no longer the boogeyman. They're actually just another tool in the shed that we can use to tell our stories.
All right, so let's take on topic number 2, AI and animation. How is AI currently being used by animators? Erik, I know you've been working on a couple projects. Maybe you could kick us off here.
Yeah, so I give a grant out to an individual of diversity who's graduated with a master's from USC, and we get to make really cool films, right? We got a project with C.K. Patterson right now, and he was able to kick out his ideas and share them. And we ended up getting Ruthie Carter on the project. We got several other Oscar winners. We've got Daveed Diggs, all these major talents. It's like, I see your vision now. I want to be part of this, and they totally.
How did they
stepped
do that? Let's talk, because I know we don't have the visuals here. But,
Those are wonderful visuals.
Yeah, but how specifically are you able with animation to go from that idea to something that other people can recognize quickly?
So it starts for him with using generative tools, a collection of them. And in the situation, this is called Chickaboom, and it's about this 9-year-old girl who wants to be a magician like her father. And so he ended up going through 371 prompts to get the character he wanted and 1,000 iterations. If you think that prompting is a simple thing, it's not. It's a poetry. It's a poetry filmmakers need to learn how to express themselves on. And everyone can write here in this room, most likely, but you're not all novelists and you're not all poets. And so learning that craft and polishing that craft is really what's going to be critical for you. So we got it to this point where we found this little girl and what we wanted. And then we went and took it to the hand animators. And the hand animators began to create custom expression sheets and characters and people. And then we just took those models and began training them in Flux. Right? It doesn't need a lot of data. You'd be surprised. You would think that you need these massive data sets, but you can train off small data sets. And now we have this character. And what we're going for in the modern world is control and consistency. The director's vision has to be able to be conveyed in a consistent manner. This is not throw spaghetti at a wall and edit what you got. That's kind of a dead concept, I think. Now we want to know exactly what the character is, how and what they're doing in a scene, where they're moving from, tools like Kling and other things, building out the backgrounds. There's just so much you can go on.
But we're not at a point. So also what I understand is that animators are finding efficiency beyond the concept to animate, but we're not at a point yet where AI can do the finishing. Yeah, shaking her head.
Yeah. So, Framestore has, double the size of Pixar in terms of the animators that we employ across all different mediums. We have so many folks in-house that are at the top of their game with exactly that, with animation. And it's just, at the moment, I haven't found a scenario where I could honestly walk up to a brand client that we've been working with for 20 years and say, this is what we think you should put on social media for your character, or this is what we think, is at the bar yet. But we do see a lot of opportunity taking the skills of the artists that we have, taking the beautiful, amazing hand-keyed animations, and looking at it a little differently. Looking at it not like, we're going to wrap this production and throw it on ice and that thing is never going to get seen again. We're looking at it in a new way that is like, how do we, potentially use like AI voice is come a long way. I mean, a lot of you have probably heard AI voice, there's tons of ethical considerations. You have to treat the artist, the celebrity, whoever you're using a voice of. It's a whole can of worms.
Scratch tracks, right? Before you bring in the celebrity to do it, you can work with a scratch track.
You can work with a scratch track. You can get timing. You can do all these things. But we are finding that you can almost 100% hit a voice, and you can actually use that voice to help drive and kind of get more out of the animation. It's not so much just about our animators, because we would rather be in Maya. We would rather be just making the thing the real way. Where it matters is when you have clients that have these characters they've invested so much into, and social media comes around. There's new forms of interaction with new audiences, new ages, and if I can't mobilize that character quickly and speak and use it, we want to we want more brands, obviously, to use characters, not less. And those tools make it potential.
But it's movement, right? You still need to do keyframes. Is Diana?
You can, but you can mix. Yeah, you could mix machine learning animation. Go ahead, Diana.
I mean, I think a lot of it does come down to also just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think this is where it all starts to get ratcheted up and the conversation goes sideways. There's a lot that you can do with the tools in terms of animation, but in the end, once you get into animation, into animating the static image, and you think you're going to change it, you have ruined your entire pipeline. You have set back your schedule. These are the considerations that have to come into when we're talking about these tools and how they're being used. And I think that the overuse of them or the reliance on them without realizing what can and cannot be done, what you need to do to get to your final product. These are the conversations that need to start to happen. And I also, in looking at, and I think one of the biggest problems with animation is that people don't know animation. And it's unfortunately, it's the people that are making the decisions. And so they're making decisions without having knowledge and saying like, well, just plug this in without realizing what each step of the process is and what the tools can and cannot do.
Yeah, there's this ongoing fear about, because I'm on Twitter a lot, about the AI bros or the tech bros stepping in and just all of a sudden taking people's jobs. Well, first of all, put everything aside, they still got to pass QC. And people in this room know some of us can't pass QC. And we've been doing this for years. So there's always going to have to be a skill set that AI cannot do. There's an understanding of fidelity. There's an understanding of finishing, storytelling. If someone came to me tomorrow and said, "Hey, I just learned AI and look at my amazing reel and it looked incredible," I'd say, "Get away from me! Like, show me your resume. I want to know that you're actually a filmmaker and a skilled artist."
Let's switch to CGI. Currently, CGI visual effects are not purely for our big sci-fi action films anymore. It's hard to imagine a movie or a television show made in Hollywood that doesn't have hundreds, if not thousands, of shots with things being added to frame, being taken away from frame, building the backdrop, how we handle action. And Brian, we'll start with you. I'm very curious just in terms of just a traditional CGI VFX pipeline. How is AI or has AI been incorporated into that yet?
Yeah, I mean, just going back, in years and years of VFX history, there's always been machine learning processes that we've used to speed things up. Depending on what you're doing, if you're segmenting out a background or you're kind of, exposing in a way where you have parallax out of a, quick background image, those kinds of things are very valuable, obviously, for virtual production, other kinds of use cases. But it's not too much different than what we've kind of been doing the whole time, I feel like. It's at that point, it's more about the IP and the other side of things. Like any talented compositor with those tools is absolutely lethal. I mean, you're going to find beautiful, amazing work coming out of, those kinds of tools in the future. I have no doubt. It doesn't mean that you don't want that consistency or you don't want to mix it with what you have established as your pipeline or, you already have built so much value there, especially for these top companies. It would be silly to not utilize that.
So in essence, that's one. Because you had said something before. You can maybe come in and scoop and find a way to do something more efficient. The example I always use is Dune. They got to turn the eyes blue. They did so much of that in the first movie. There's some machine learning that makes that process a lot easier, a lot less tedious. But that's really kind of what you're talking about, right? Is like these little things, these little moments that could come in and make things more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, so you look at commercials with historical figures, or you look at films where you need a digital double, and this is one area where we're seeing that, the quality of a very small area of a screen is a lot easier to hit than trying to do the entire image, entire canvas, and whole shebang. There are certain scenarios where you might have an advertising job come in and they don't have the money for a $250,000 model of a beautiful face that does all this, everything that you could ever want. What they might have a budget for is like 3 shots, and that might be all they need. So the difference between, if you can walk back to the director and say, if you'll agree that these are the shots, nothing is changing, and you don't have a lot of tweakability in this, that's a compromise some are willing to make and some can't. But I think that at the end of the day, ethics, money, everything aside, in the future, if someone walks into your office and wants to produce an amazing piece of content, and that is the deciding factor between them being able to afford it or not, I don't think you're, running the risk of losing jobs and doing that kind of thing. I think you're bringing in more work. You're bringing in a new opportunity to employ your artists just the same.
So we just shot Europa on the Sony Stage 7, the LED volume, recently. And we had several really complex shots because this is kind of, say, space, sci-fi, and whatnot. So we turned to some of the tools. And I'd say right now it's about 50-50. When you're kicking something out of, say, runway, or you're segmenting or anything that, you're getting a product that's roughly 720p with 8-bit color, right? You can still upscale that using something like Topaz to 16-bit, to maybe even 4K, but it's not looking that great still. But it's going to be there. It's going to be there very soon. And so like the Lionsgate deal is a significant warning, I think, that someone's has taken a deeper look and that they think that it's on the edge at this point. But it's going to empower a whole new class of indie films to be taught. Like, so I've been making some of these things on these LED stages that are more action adventure. Then they have no place to go to in the indie short film category because there's not really an action adventure short filmy kind of thing that has huge budgets typically. But this is really going to empower you guys to tell the stories that you haven't quite been able to do before, because it will open those doors.
Just to kind of bring it back down to so I just shot a documentary. So this is not an LED stage thing, this is a doc. We found a shot that we had to reverse. So now we're in edit. In our posts, and a shot that we had to reverse, and we reversed and everyone was happy, and then all of a sudden it ran through some filter and we noticed that there was a jogger in the shot who's now running backwards. And we're like, we're hosed. What are we gonna do? And I wanted to just to make it kind of really relatable for everyone that can't shoot an LED stage, that does, because VFX is not just spaceships and pew, pew, pew. It's a lot of things. And so I've got now a runner who's going backwards in this shot, and through a tool, it was so much easier for the editor and then for our post guy to flip it around. And it made it that much easier, because he even said to us, he's like, this would have been a 3-day job, which would have kept me from getting to the story. So he was able to focus on the story and it ran through. So that's more so what we're talking about here. It's all the other stuff and the lost job, that's for another panel, and that should be discussed. But right now it's about what that tool enabled my editor and post guy to do so they could get to getting the story done.
I got a quick real-world example. A movie just came out this weekend called Here. Robert Zemeckis, Tom Hanks. They use generative AI. I can't believe no one's even really talking about it. They use a company called Metaphysics, but they use generative AI for de-aging. I mean, these guys probably know even a lot more about how that works. It's a hybrid. It's some machine learning involved, but it is a generative AI process where they take thousands of images of Tom Hanks to de-age him. So my question to everyone in this room is, why does only Hollywood get access to that? Why shouldn't we get access to those tools and be able to use it to keep our production costs down? Doesn't take away from the story. It's still an artist crafting his narrative, but he found a way to use a tool to tell his story for 1/4 of a Marvel budget, which 5 years ago that would have cost $200 million to do what he just did. Now it costs 50.
Just really quick on that. I love it. Yeah, I want to replace as many faces as possible. It's such a cool workflow. It's great. But I don't want everyone to have
faces,
that.
Replace
right?
faces in a normal
in
VFX
a film,
way.
In a VFX context, I think
not
that,
change the actor.
Yeah, there's a fringe area of these tools that are so open and that anyone can download, and I do think there's not enough there right now. These are professionals should be using these tools, or people that are vetted, or at least have some chain back to you in some sort of way that I've downloaded and I'm using this model. There's none of that right now, and it's a little bit, I say, dangerous. But
this is going to be the tricky topic. So let's talk about generative AI. Now, there's AI tools, ways to come in and do something very specific and bring efficiency, and then there is AI generating the image. Which is a very tricky topic, so I want to figure out where we are with generative AI, but there's no way of having this conversation considering the studios rightly are concerned about copyright, and I think artists are concerned about stealing. So it's impossible to talk about generative AI without talking about clean and dirty models. What was used to train generative AI? And so it's a loaded question, but I'm wondering where we are. And Erik, I think we'll start with you. Where are we with generative AI and this issue of a clean versus a dirty model?
Well, I think this is a really tough one. We're absolutely moving towards clean models right now. And you can custom make small models of characters, people, environments on your own, but holistic.
By training it, by giving it your own stuff?
By training it on your own data, which would make it clean. And you're going to see a major movement or kind of a gold rush of people moving towards clean data at this particular point here in the near future. But what you have right now is very complex and very tricky in finding out where it is. So like, for example, on Chica, we air gapped everything, we hand drew everything, or in any of the other pieces we're doing at this particular point, we're still shooting, and we might have used it as a previs tool or something, but that's going to evolve and that's going to change. And so I definitely think that is the future, and that's where it's going to come to, where you're going to have that, but it's probably going to be 8 to 18 months.
Jump in real quick. So what we're talking about in the end, I think, is provenance and knowing what's inside of something that I'm being fed. And that's not a structure that's currently built into these products. But it's not because
Diana likes to say it's a big old mess.
It's a big old mess. It's
trillions of images.
But there's 100% no reason it can't be built in. So if we're at the start of this new social contract with how we're thinking about using our collective data, I think it's like time to think about that part.
And this also goes a little bit above our pay grade, and I'll just say something spicy that has zero context. But if the studios were that worried about copyright, they would have been in this battle from the beginning 4 years ago. So, I mean, like, it does call into question what we're actually doing here in terms of generative, but like, they held all the cards because they hold all the copyrights. And they haven't been in this discussion.
Yeah, amen. I mean, look, there's a real chance that we can't go back in time. Let's think about the way these things are trained. They're trained on hundreds of trillions of data that I don't know, like in our lifetime, if we could figure out what they all trained on. But I do believe, just like with music, just like with streaming, you can still right the ship. We can still figure out a way where artists are compensated, actors are compensated. Any artist can be compensated moving forward. Going backwards, I don't know, but I do believe there is a way when all these companies come together to have that come to Jesus moment, like to fix it. So at the end of the day, we all want to feel good. We're all artists. Even, I might be different than you. I might experiment with AI tools every single day. That's part of my DNA now, but I still want to feel good. And I went to art school. I studied fine arts. I got a BFA in art school at Pratt. So I know what it feels like to be a real artist, and I know what it feels like to be taken advantage of being in Hollywood for 10 years. So I think we can all come together, and this means all the above pay grade people come together and figure out how we can go forward feeling good as an industry.
I want to say something spicy, and I want to get your guys' reaction
Spicy.
to this. I see generative AI, and I'm thinking of some of the projects that Diana's overseen, and it's like you get that trailer, that horror trailer you made. I'm like, oh, I get that artist's idea, and I get it. It does not feel to my eye like we've crossed. It feels a little bit dead. It doesn't feel like we've caught. And to me, that's more like the ways that we can use this, yes. But when we start talking about generative AI, it does not feel like we've hit that uncanny valley yet.
So I'm going to throw some spice back at you.
Thanks.
So I don't disagree with that, but I'm also 57. So let's talk about the generations of audiences that come up. My first video game was Pong. All right? Let's break down where we're at now with video games. So now we have a generation of audience that's coming up that has only played video games. They are more forgiving to what we call Uncanny Valley. And we have to be very careful about that, because what we may think will stop it they're like, well, we're okay with it. This is also the generation that, broadcast yourself, which is where we're like, why would you do that? Why do we have to hear from you? And guess what? It is a category that is making a lot of money. So my spiciness is like, what would happen if this does become a category of entertainment that doesn't take away from film, from TV, from video games, or anything else, but what happens if something that is purely AI generated with the same look becomes a selection for someone to enjoy?
Which I think is a good place to end, because I think ultimately the next conversation is there a new type of content that's going to come from this, and that we're thinking in terms of old models?
Yes.
All right.
New
I
genre.
want to thank the panel. These are really great people, smart people. Thank you.